his idea, the concept of the book is that we can either focus on the gap or the gain.
You're the A. You're like boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. And then you have the other people that work the opposite way. So
To the front of their head, depending what they're focusing on. That's a challenge, right? Because it's naturally easier for us to coach somebody who thinks in the same way. I think a lot of people set goals that are easier because they don't want to miss them, because then they get that gap feeling and that makes them feel crappy.
Yeah.
A lot of times what we think is so important or bothering us so much, as you zoom out, it's a small thing, right?
It's crazy.
Treading water is the same as drowning to people like you and me. You better start swimming. Welcome to I'm the One podcast. I'm your host, Rob Green.
We talk about mindsets a lot, passions and things like that. I'm a huge reader, love reading. Is there any books that you would kind of recommend or that bring up, mindsets and passions?
I mean, there's a lot of books that I like, and I should probably just do an episode on all the books that I've read that have really informed my opinion, and I've evolved through them over the years. And I think the best books are the ones you read more than once.
100%.
And I think around mindset, this is something my team and I have talked a lot about, my kids and I have talked about. There's a book by Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach called The Gap and the Gain. And I think he might have wrote it as a small, thin book. And then he worked with Ben Hardy to make an actual proper, like, hardcover book on it. And just the concept of the gap and the gain. Are you familiar with this at all?
No, I'm not.
So I'll probably butcher this, but I'll give you my summary, at least how it applied to me and how I think about it. His idea, the concept of the book is that we can either focus on the gap or the gain. And the gap is where we are now compared to where we think we ought to be. We all think, hey, by this age or by this time or my business or whatever, I should be married by 30 or I should be a millionaire by 40 or whatever the expectations are. We can either focus on the expectations gap or we could focus on the gain by looking backwards and saying, hey, this is where I came from and this is where I am now. Mm-hmm. And that concept is so simple, I think, yet really, really powerful. And Dan did an excellent job of really bringing this to light and really giving clarity around it. He does an excellent job, I think, in my opinion, one of the best I've ever seen. But it's similar to other things I've heard from Tony Robbins in the past, or Bob Proctor talked about this. And, you can draw it out with graphs and lines and stuff. But I think the real key is just say, am I looking backwards from where I've come from, or am I looking to where I think I ought to be? Because one creates happiness and one creates disappointment.
Okay, yeah, I get that. When you talk about that, the first thing when you talked about what the book is and the gap and the gain, I think of when you think about where you need to go or where you want to be or where you thought you were going to be. Because I remember when I was 20 or 18, I was like, okay, when I'm 35, I'm going to do this. And I remember writing down, I'm like, making $500,000 a year, doing this, and I thought I was being financed, but I don't know numbers, so that's not going to be me. So, but then it's the reality of like looking back to where you are now and what you've achieved and how you got there. And it's such a different mindset and perspective. So I love this. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think that type A personalities we're driven. We want to succeed. We want to move faster. And so sometimes we set these goals, and there's a lot of cliches or quotes around this. Like, I shoot for the stars, but I hit the moon.
Sure.
I'm going to be happy with that. But then a lot of us go, well, I shot for the stars, I hit the moon, and that's great, but I really want to hit the stars. So it's more around your mental thought process around that. I do this. It's really easy with the kids because my kids are 14 and 12, and they're like, I wanted to be able to do this, and I didn't get there. And I try to help them reframe and say, but where were you a year ago? Let's use anything, school, sports, whatever it is, sports. Dad, I want to run a 6-minute mile. I only ran a 6:12 mile. But last year, you ran a 7-minute mile. So we have a couple ways to look at this. Yeah. If we look at this over time, you either improved 48 seconds over last year, or you're 12 seconds short of where you ought to be. And the key is the ought to be is just something we made up. It's not a real true measurement.
Well, it's a goal though, right? So, and this is what I do with people in goals when I'm coaching them. I'm like, look, just because I use this analogy all the time. It's the flat tire analogy. So like if you're driving, you get a flat tire. Do you get out and pop the other three?
Nope.
Right. You fix it and you move on.
Yeah.
But a lot of us with goals, we get discouraged because we didn't do it. Yeah. Food's an easy one. Oh, I ate a piece of pizza, so I'm off. And they just abandon it. And what you're talking about is at 12 seconds, missed it by 12 seconds, but you made the 48 or whatever. And now it's just like you readjust, you train a little bit differently or whatever, and you're going to get to that goal. You just readjust from where you are.
Yeah, I think it can apply in so many parts of your life, right? So it's the family part, it's the personal part. And then I'll talk about my team. we read this book. I think it was maybe January or February. We do a book of the month every month, and we
Nice.
read it as a team, and then we discuss it. I want to say it was January, but we read it, and I need to do a better job of, and some leaders in my team need to do a better job of. We all want to strive to go fast and go big. Yet everybody likes that recognition accomplishment part.
Mhm.
So it's very easy to see the gap of where the team ought to be or where we should have been instead of celebrating the wins.
Yep.
Right. So that was the big takeaway when we read it as a team is like,
Mhm.
we've got to do a better job of consistently celebrating the wins, not just saying, hey, we fell short here.
100%.
Right. And because not everybody's wired the same, I think, some people want the attaboy or the attagirl
Sure.
more than others,
Yeah.
right? I've never been that guy.
Right.
When I worked in corporate America, I was like, save all your $20 gift cards and all the gold stars for
Yeah.
like fourth graders. Like,
Right.
I don't need this stuff. It doesn't motivate me. But a lot of people are motivated by that. So just getting in touch with what each person wants and what their goal is really critical. And then celebrating on a consistent, regular basis, not annually or once a quarter.
Right. So with your team,
Yeah.
you know the exact person. I'm sure at this point you know the person. I was like, this person needs this person needs this, and
We try to get it. We try to understand that, right? We do a
yeah,
lot of. We've done Colby assessment. We've done 6 types of working genius.
gotcha.
We've done a bunch of assessments to try to understand and help people understand what motivates them.
Yeah.
Because this goes into whole motivation. Are you extrinsically motivated or are you intrinsically motivated?
Mhm.
I'm intrinsically motivated. I don't need the externals and the extrinsic part to actually motivate me.
Right.
And so for me, it's easy to get caught up in the well. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to get it done.
And that's tough for you because that's you're the A. You're like boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, and then you have the other people that work the opposite way.
Yep.
So that's on you to be, because you're at the top. You're the culture of this
Yeah.
place, right? So you have to, in a way, figure these people out to really coach the best. Like with any team, right? If you're coaching them, you don't all coach them the same. You have to coach them the way that they work best.
That's a challenge, right? Because it's naturally easier for us to coach somebody who thinks in the same way because you relate better. It's
Yeah.
easy. It's relevant. I know how to motivate this person. I think really getting better as a leader is talking about how can I motivate people that maybe are motivated slightly different than the way I am, and just being aware of that and understanding that. But I think the key about the whole concept about the gap and the gain is just a simple tweak. How long do you stay in the gap? And what I mean by that is we naturally, even though I'm conscious of this on a regular basis, it's so easy to go, I'm in the gap.
Of course.
How long am I going to stay in the gap? And it's fascinating to me. Some people stay in the gap for weeks and months. If I have a down day or I have a moment where I feel in the gap, my job, as I think about it, is how do I get out of the gap the fastest?
Mhm.
Not that I'll never, I hope to, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to prevent going into the gap, right? I ought to be here. I'm here. It could be money. It could be health. It could
Right.
be relationships, whatever it is. But how do I change my perspective? Like you talked earlier today, we were talking about changing your environment at your house. When you change your environment, you see things differently, right?
Your brain's
Brain
responds
fires,
to,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Like
gotta pay attention.
I sleep on the same side of the bed.
Yeah.
I'll go sleep on the other side of the bed. It's a whole different world.
Oh,
It's like, what the
man.
heck happened here? Wait, this is a different. Where am I? I don't
Yeah.
even know what's going on. You
Right.
do little things. Brush your teeth with the other hand.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, because you're like, wait, do I know how to brush my teeth with my
It's
left
great.
hand?
That wakes your brain up, and it's a
Yeah,
great way to start your day. What you were talking about, like, falling into the gap for sometimes weeks, like, people it's a default brain. It's what our
yeah.
brain it's how we've been trained. I'm 52, had 52 years of training to do what society has told me, which, by the way, most of it's wrong. So, it's all about mindfulness and
Yeah.
paying attention to yourself, and that's the goal in my mind for all of us is pay attention to your thoughts, your actions, your feelings, because when you do fall into the gap, the more mindfulness and do a mindfulness practice to start strengthening your brain to catch that stuff faster. Because at first, may take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The more mindfulness and paying attention you do to yourself, then it's a week, then it's a day, and then soon you'll start fading into it, and you'll be like, "Oh, I know where I'm going." You're gonna redirect right away. So it's just paying attention, mindfulness.
Well, I think I agree with you completely. And I think you can also elaborate on that a little bit more because now it goes back to the whole what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I think a lot of people set goals that are easier because they don't want to miss them because then they get that gap feeling and that
Right.
makes them feel crappy.
Yeah.
And if you really dissect that, it's really, really interesting to me because you're like, okay, wait a minute. I set an easier goal because I didn't want to be disappointed if I missed it.
Yeah.
But what if I would have put a bigger goal on it and then I still missed it by the same amount? I would actually be better off
But be okay with that
and be
miss.
okay with it and not live in that gap.
Yeah.
And
I
so
like that.
for me, it's a great book. I highly recommend it to everybody. I love the concept around it. And I think the easiest way for someone to take action about it now, like what I would recommend for people, is pick something. If you, first of all, if you've never written a goal down,
Mm.
take some time, write some goals
It's a
down.
wish.
Have
It's
have
not a
some goals.
goal.
It's a hope. Hope is not a plan. Never a plan. So write some. If you've had a goal that you've missed recently or in the last 6 months, just go ahead and think about where you were before you started, and then what you've accomplished, and say, "I'm going to focus on the gain." I'll use my daughter as an example. Yeah, 48 seconds. You got 48 seconds faster. How do you feel about that? And it's if you're grateful and you focus on the gains, it's really hard for me at least to be angry.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to be angry, hard to be upset because I'm trying to focus on the gains I've made and how grateful I am. And that puts me in a default mode of happiness and energized.
Yeah.
And then if the opposite is that we focus on something we didn't make,
Right.
then what happens is we're kind of bummed out, low energy.
Totally.
I had a low energy day on Monday this week actually, and it was weird because I don't typically have these days. And
Yeah.
I was like, "This is weird. I don't like this. I don't like the way I feel." And
Did you
so,
know where it was originally, or was
yep,
it just
I
one
knew
that
exactly where
okay,
it came
okay,
from,
okay.
and I just had to recalibrate.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I thought, man, actually it's funny because I talked to my wife about this, and I said, "Listen, if I look back 10 years and I said, hey, you are where you are today," I would have laughed at why I was bummed out about whatever I was bummed out about. Because
100%.
it's like, wait a minute, this is great. Life is awesome. Always change your perspective and how you think about it. And the easiest thing to do is just look backwards
Yeah.
as opposed to looking at what you've missed.
You know what I do with a lot of people in the same sort of is zoom out.
Mhm.
Like we look at this one thing and you get focused in on it. If you zoom out at the big picture, you normally like, oh wait, which is just what you're saying. I've
Yeah.
done so much. I've done so much good. So zoom out a lot of times.
I love that.
Big picture.
I love it. Yeah. I heard a short story I'll share with you about Huberman. Andrew Huberman
Mhm.
shared it. I went to his first in-person live event
Nice.
last May, maybe 2022 in Seattle, and
Yeah.
he shared a story about a cuttlefish. Are you familiar with cuttlefish?
I've heard. I don't know.
I had no idea what it looked
Yeah,
like.
go ahead.
Honestly, I had to look it up on Google. I was like, I have no
They
idea.
cuddling each other? I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
what I
That's
guessed.
what
Was
I
gonna
went.
two fish cuddling together. But he said that they have the ability, and I'll probably butcher this story, but they have the ability to transfix their eyes from the side of their head to the front of their head, depending what they're focusing on.
Okay.
So they're on the side of the head; they can
Mm.
see all the water around them. You put food in front of them, boom, they come to the front. They focus on the food. They
Food.
get the food, eat food, and then they zoom back out. So that framework has been in my head ever since he shared that story. Because how do I go to here? Bam, I'm on it. And then how do I pull back out? How do I zoom in? And then how do I zoom back out?
Yeah.
And can I have enough flexibility to be able to do that, to zoom in and zoom out and then know when to actually apply those? Because a lot of times what we think is so important or bothering us so much, as you zoom out, it's a small thing,
Wow. It's
right?
crazy.
And then you say, well, wait a minute. What is the one thing that really matters if I dive into it and I zoom in? That has a cascade or a waterfall effect to everything else we do.
Yup. Hey, you focus on that negative, that's what you're gonna be doing, and like you said, you focus on
Yeah.
the positive, completely different mindset.
Yep, yep. I have a lot of friends that have read this book also, and I think everybody in Strategic Coach program has read it. It's just an amazing book. The team got a lot of value out of it, so highly recommend it. And just try that, practice that concept of just trying to say, "What have I gained?" and then not focusing on where you ought to be, because it just sets you up for sadness, in my opinion. So, hey, great talking to you as always.
Sure.
All right, take care.
All right.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with friends. Visit I'mTheOne.com and ask me anything. And as always, stay curious and never stop becoming the one.